I'm Matt from Untrained Terrain, and today we're talking about Gabriel Wortman. Gabriel Wortman was born July 5th, 1968 in Hamilton, Ontario, to parents Paul and Evelyn Wortman. Now, Paul and Evelyn didn't get along well, and one day Paul's brother, Gabriel's uncle, Chris, saw Paul beating Evelyn so bad that he took Gabriel with him to live when Gabriel was 2 years old. Now, this only lasted for a few months until Paul went and retrieved Gabriel, and he moved the whole family to Massachusetts to look for work. And while they were in Massachusetts, Evelyn got pregnant. Now, Paul was dead set against having another baby, so they put the baby up for adoption when Evelyn gave birth. That child would turn out to be Jeff Samuelson, who became a master carpenter and worked on the restoration of a copper-clad bell tower in his hometown of North Brookfield, Massachusetts. In 2010, Jeff Samuelson received news that his birth parents wanted to meet him, after giving him up 40 years earlier. Now, this came as a complete surprise to Samuelson because he had never heard of his birth parents before, so he decided to meet them. Now, Paul and Evelyn would travel to Massachusetts to meet Jeff in 2010. And after that, Jeff and his wife Robin would travel to Canada twice to see Paul and Evelyn. However, the second time they met Gabriel, and Jeff said that when he met Paul and Gabriel, he didn't like them from the start because they were very aggressive and assertive. Now, Gabriel was much like his father when it came to his temper and his anger towards other people. Gabriel had a very tough childhood. I mean, him and his mother were both abused by his father. And after giving Jeff up for adoption in about 1970, they moved to the Greater Moncton area so they could live there with their 2-year-old son, Gabriel. One of Gabriel's uncles, one of Paul's brothers, recalled one time at a Christmas dinner that Paul beat Evelyn so bad on the floor that she was bawling. Paul beating Evelyn and Gabriel became an almost everyday occurrence, and this really affected Gabriel and caused him to have underlying anger and resentment that he kept inside and in turn would boil to a point of no return. Gabriel would keep this anger inside, and he would take it out on anyone who crossed him later in life. Another one of Paul's brothers, Gabriel's uncles, recalled a time that Paul put a gun to Gabriel's head, then put the gun to his mother's head, saying that if she ever left him, he would kill her. Jeff Samuelson said that after meeting his birth father, Paul would confide in him and tell him about a time where Gabriel had a blanket as a sookie, and Paul didn't think he needed this blanket anymore, so he burnt it in front of young Gabriel, and Gabriel was only a young child at this point. The youngest brother of Gabriel's, Chris, said that when Gabriel was 7 years old, his father handed him a gun and told him to shoot it while it was pointed at him. A later friend of Gabriel said that he recalled this story to her, telling her he was alone with his father in a wooded area, and his father handed him a gun, saying, "Shoot me, I know you want to." Now this friend, Lisa Banfield, would turn out to be Gabriel's common-in-law wife, and she said that Gabriel would often recall times where Paul used to beat Evelyn mercifully in front of Gabriel. And even as a child, Gabriel never called his parents Mom and Dad. He called them Paul and Evelyn by their names. There was one time that Paul saw a car nearly hit Gabriel, so Paul got in his own car, chased the driver down, and when the driver stopped, Paul pulled him out of the car and beat him to a bloody pulp in the middle of the road. When Gabriel was younger, as a preteen, he had a puppy, and when his puppy made a mess on the floor and Gabriel didn't clean it up, Paul handed Gabriel a gun and made him shoot the puppy, which he did. According to Gabriel's uncle, Neil, Paul once said to Gabriel, "It's not so bad committing the crime, it's getting caught for committing the crime." So he was that kind of father. And Paul had a collection of police uniforms that he would wear and go harass people and pull people over on the side of the road pretending to be a police officer. And this was a trait that Gabriel would go on to imitate later in his life. This love of wearing police uniforms and owning police gear and vehicles is something that Gabriel would grow to love and use to his advantage when he was planning the events of April 18th, 2020. Gabriel would grow up watching his father shoplifting, vandalizing, stealing landscape equipment and lumber from garden centers, and last but not least, the horrific abuse not only to him but to his mother at the hands of his father. So basically, Gabriel had a really bad childhood, and he had a fucked up life, and this would lead to the decisions that he would make later on in life that would in turn result in his death. Now, when he was a child, Chris said that he would watch Gabriel trade with younger children and cheat them, and Gabriel used to build explosives when he was a kid to try to boost his ego and make himself look cool, and that grew to the point that he was making pipe bombs by the time he was a young adult. Gabriel would go on to study dentistry at the University of New Brunswick, moving from Fredericton to Moncton to go to the school when he was 19. A college friend of Gabriel's said that he was a little bit different, but he was beautiful and had a really deep heart, but he was the brunt of everybody's jokes. Now, during this time, Wortman met Lisa Banfield, who would go on to be his common-law wife. Gabriel would even go so far as to hold a gun to Lisa's head, saying he could blow her head off. She worked for Gabriel at his Dartmouth denturist office, making and polishing dentures. And if she didn't behave like he wanted, he would punish her withholding her pay, sometimes threatening to cut her off and throw her out. Wortman called Lisa his trophy cunt wife. And on Christmas Day in 2004, he even raped her during a fight. He would isolate her from others so he could have her all to himself. Now, Gabriel was quite the businessman. He was the president of Northumberland Investments, and he also ran 2 denturist clinics in Dartmouth. Wortman also became the director of Berkshire Broman Corporation, a New Brunswick company which he used to buy an RCMP cruiser. This cruiser would come to play a big role in Gabriel's life.
In the middle of a major manhunt, it's hard to picture a real police officer pulling into a parking lot and getting out this casually just to change what he's wearing. Turns out that man's the target of the manhunt, caught Sunday morning on this surveillance video shared with police. His killing spree underway since the night before.
Lisa said that 2 years into their relationship, they were having an argument at a party about whether they were staying the night or not. And Gabriel started drinking, even though he was supposed to be the designated driver, so Lisa left. And Gabriel tracked her down, pulled her out of her car, and beat her mercifully for this. Apparently, Lisa had to attend to Gabriel like he was some kind of royalty, like she had to wait on his every demand, she had to meet his every need, everything he wanted she had to do. Now on the evening of April 18th, 2020, Lisa and Gabriel were celebrating 19 years together at their home in Portapique when they got in an argument, and Lisa would leave and go to their cottage. Now, Gabriel showed up at the cottage when she was sleeping and pulled her by the hair out of bed, saying, "Get dressed." He then dragged her to the warehouse where he had parked the RCMP car. He put her in the car, and luckily she managed to escape by pulling open the plexiglass and jumping out and running into the woods. Now, while she was in the woods, she could hear Gabriel whistling and walking around shooting gunshots around. It wouldn't be until daybreak as she ran to a nearby neighbor's house looking for help. That neighbor then called 911. Gabriel then went back home and set his home on fire, and his neighbor, Gregory Blair, noticed this and went over to try to help, and Gabriel shot him dead, then went to his wife. His wife ran into her bedroom, but Gabriel went to the bedroom and shot her dead. Now her 2 kids ran away and ran to the neighbor's house. After escaping, he spent the night parked behind a welding shop in Debert, 26 kilometers east of Portapique. By this time, all police and emergency responders were on the lookout for Wortman.
86, come. Go ahead. All right, come up to Highway 2 and Portapac Beach Road. So keep coming up. You're going to meet a police officer there. They do have a GSW victim with them. I'll try to get some more information if you need any more resources there. Continue on, meet them at the intersection of the 2 and Portapac.
Is there also a structure fire at this site?
Nothing I got reported.
We're seeing huge flames of smoke from where we are.
Is it off in a distance, say 10 or 11 o'clock from your location? That'd be where you'll be going for a civic.
Yeah, copy. That's exactly where it is.
Yeah, that might be why they're getting us to hold off. We're actually going to stage at the Great Village Fire Hall. It's going to be on the number 2, just as you're in Great Village. It's probably the best spot for us to park the vehicles there right now. They've moved the roadblock back from the scene to be safe there.
At 5:03 a.m., Wortman left the welding shop and drove to a house that had 2 occupants, killed both the occupants, and killed their 2 dogs. After Wortman killed the 2 occupants and their 2 dogs at the house, he stayed there for a few hours, and when he left, he set the house on fire. But a neighbor saw who was out for a walk with their dog and went over and tried to help, so Wortman shot them dead and then left. Now, Gabriel went on a shooting rampage across Portapique, Nova Scotia, killing anybody that came in his tracks. He also burned their houses down after he killed them. Now, when RCMP officers arrived in the scene, they would encounter witnesses who told them that Gabriel was the culprit and that he was driving a replica RCMP cruiser. RCMP later determined that Wortman left Portapeak around 10:45 p.m. by taking a dirt road through a nearby blueberry field. Now, by this time, all police and emergency responders were on the lookout for Wortman driving a police cruiser, and there was a bolo put out, a be on the lookout. At 9:05 a.m., Wortman would kill another woman who was out for a walk in Wentworth Valley, and then he went to Glenholm to a house and the residents he knew, and they armed themselves with a shotgun and would not allow him entry, and they stayed safe that way. By 10 a.m., Wortman would conduct 2 traffic stops and kill the occupants of the cars. Sometime before 10:49 a.m., Wortman would pull up beside RCMP Constable Chad Morrison and shoot him with a handgun through the window. Now, he injured the officer, and the officer would drive to an abandoned emergency outlet until paramedics picked him up and took him to the hospital. He then drove less than 500 meters, collided head-on with Officer Heidi Stevenson, then killed her, took her gun, and set both cars on fire. He then shot at a nearby motorist who stopped to help and stole their Ford Escape. Now he was in Shubenacadie, and he went to a woman's home and shot her dead, and then he changed his police uniform into a new uniform and stole her Mazda 3 and continued his journey. Now, after Lisa Banfield finally left the woods after hiding there all night, and as she went to that person's house who called 911, she was able to get in contact with police officers, and she gave them vital information about the case. Over 13 hours after starting the hunt for Wortman, 2 RCMP officers saw him gassing up at an Irving Big Stop in Nova Scotia and shot him dead on the scene, thus stopping the rampage.
The emergency response team noticed him staring straight ahead, recognizing the killer from photos shared earlier that morning. The Mountie and his partner opened fire, shooting multiple times without hesitation, ending the man's life. Evidence released earlier at the public inquiry showed at almost the same time, the gunman shot himself in the head. Ross Lord, Global News.
But we begin with exclusive new information about the mass murder in Nova Scotia. 22 people were killed when a gunman went on a rampage over the weekend. The RCMP have not released a timeline or much detail about the chaotic 14 hours or so between when the first call came in until the gunman was shot and killed. But our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stevenson, is hearing some exclusive details from her sources. Mercedes, what can you tell us?
Well, Donna, we're getting a little bit of a picture of what happened that night before the gunman's rampage. He and his girlfriend attended a party that was just down the street from where his cottage was in Portapique. At that party, I am told that they got into an argument. Both left at some point and went back to his cottage. At that point, he escalated and became violent with his girlfriend. He assaulted her, and then he proceeded to tie her up. Luckily, Donna, she managed to escape and run into the woods. After that, at some point, the gunman goes out with a number of firearms, and he begins shooting people, including at the house where the party was held. Then there's a bit of a black hole. We don't know what comes next, but the next thing that we learn that is at 7 a.m. the next day, the RCMP find the gunman's girlfriend. She has been hiding, and she is able to give them critical information that changes, frankly, the entire scope of the investigation and how they're looking for him. She reveals to them that he is likely dressed as a police officer and driving an extremely realistic car that looks just like an RCMP cruiser. And she, in fact, Donna, is the person who provided the picture to the RCMP that we all saw on Twitter and how they got the news out that he was impersonating a police officer.
Gabriel ended up killing 22 people on his rampage, and his motives were stupid. It was because he didn't like them, or it was because they were just random people who got in his way. Thanks to these 2 officers, the rampage was over and everybody was safe. But this would not be the end, because there would be a lot of controversy over laws and regulations concerning guns and safety. Because of this incident, the Canadian government put in a bunch of new gun laws and a bunch of new safety recommendations, and they also changed the emergency alert system so everybody could be alerted if something like this happened again. I just wanted to say thanks for watching, and if you like what you see, like and subscribe.